Rachel, let's start with the basics if we can. What is retrofitting, and why do you feel homeowners should be more informed and care about it?
So yeah, retrofitting is really making upgrades to your home that improve the way it performs, and that could include lots of different things. So increasing the energy efficiency and lowering your bills. It could mean reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with heating and your home and your hot water. It could mean that you're doing work to improve the indoor air quality within your home, trying to eliminate damp and mold, making the home more comfortable, making sure it's not too hot, not too cold, also making it more resilient to events like flooding, and also introducing renewable energy. There's lots of different ways to retrofit your home, and it really depends on what your house is like, but also what your own priorities are.
How do you know if your home does need or could be retrofitted?
Well, not to panic everyone, but pretty much every home that exists right now that isn't a new build will need retrofitting, probably within the next 10 years in some way or another. And there are different types of retrofitting you might need to do. So if you've got a home that's has really high energy demands, if you're finding it cold, if you're finding it drafty, if it's uninsulated, then you might look at doing some work to the fabric. If you've got damp and mold, maybe the air's a bit stuffy, then you might need to increase your ventilation alongside insulation. And ventilation's a really key thing that we need to think about in any form of retrofit. And then if you've got a fossil fuel boiler, you're using oil, you're using gas, at some point you're going to need to switch to a low carbon heat source.
It's a big topic, isn't it?
It's a very big
You've
topic.
just kind of unloaded this. Wow.
It's what I dedicate my whole life to, so yes.
It's huge, and it's quite complex, but there's lots of things that people can do.
Yeah, so many things that people can do, and there are lots of different places to start, and there are people that you can get to help you to sort of plan this out, and I think we'll talk about that in a bit maybe.
Is it fair to say that there's quite a number of myths that are out there on the topic?
Yeah, there are lots of myths. I mean, the biggest myth for me is that retrofitting is just about energy efficiency and carbon. And really, I think it's much bigger than that, and there are so much wider benefits. So things like improving your health, by improving the indoor air quality, by improving the temperature you keep your home at, improving your comfort, how it feels to exist within your home is such a big impact that you can get if you retrofit well. So it's not just about saving the planet, although that's really important, or lowering your bills, which is really fundamental for lots of people, but it's much more holistic. There are other myths as well about different types of low carbon heating. So there are lots of myths out there about heat pumps. I suppose what I'd say there is just make sure you're getting your advice from a reputable source. Look at the government website.
I was going to say, are there cowboys and cowgirls out there?
The thing is, we've had an industry that's been installing the same sort of boilers for a very long time, and it takes a long time for that to shift into what is now a different form of technology that we're using to heat our homes. So Trustmark is a great source of certified tradespeople. Someone that's MCS certified will be able to provide you with really good advice. That's their micro certification scheme. So they're people that are qualified to install renewables, heat pumps, things like that, and they're made sure that they've got the right skills to be able to give you the right advice, design a system and install it in a way that's going to work properly. If
someone was living in an older home, what would you say would be the most cost-effective retrofit options? And I say that you very clearly made the point that there are different motivations to do this, and it's not all about the cost, but it's just looking at cost.
Yeah. Well, first up, especially if you're living in an old or traditional building, making sure that it's in a good state of repair. Wet walls let out much more heat than dry ones, so thinking about go and have a look at your pipes, your gutters, are any blocked or any leaking, how good a state of repair are your walls, does any areas need replacing or sort of remedial works, because that's going to have a big impact, and it's a really good first place to start. There are also some sort of quick and easy wins, so making sure you've got good heating controls with thermostats, and even in historic buildings people sometimes use heavy curtains in the winter, particularly to protect them against really bad cold days. And then I think those retrofit measures that you might consider on top of that, they need to be informed by a retrofit plan. So I'd really recommend speaking to an expert, a retrofit coordinator. You can find a list on Trustmark, maybe an architect or a surveyor who can provide you with a plan so you understand what your home's like and what it needs.
Does my draft proofing count?
Your draft proofing absolutely counts. Yeah, I share a job with Sarah Edmonds, and she has a community retrofit organisation that she runs alongside our job, and she goes along and makes draft exclusions out of socks and old pairs of tights and things like that. They're a great sort of short-term quick solution, particularly if you've got ill-fitting doors and things like that.
It was quite a while ago, not in the house that we currently live in, but we had the house, somebody came round and tested the house, where were we losing heat? And I was absolutely gobsmacked at where it was disappearing.
Did they have a thermal imaging camera and they were looking on like more airtight?
No, it was airtightness and you know, down the backs of cupboards and either side of pipes, and actually it was really simple to block up the drop proofing.
So yeah, really big thing that you can do is obviously stop all the cold air coming in. That's really important, but then I think also it's worth bearing in mind for lots of people, if you're blocking up the drafts, make sure you're getting enough fresh air as well. So make sure that you've got the right ventilation. For some people that will be trickle vents in the windows, for others it might be mechanical ventilation. So what you don't want to do is seal up all the drafts and then have a sort of stuffy internal environment. But it's good to be able to control the ventilation that you get, so you're getting the right ventilation in the right way rather than little bits of cold air here and there.
I've recently visited a house that was hermetically sealed. So it had fans and things to make sure it had clean air. But it was quite a strange environment. I mean, brilliant for the environment and for the costs of running it, or very expensive to pull off, but it was completely sealed.
How did you feel when you
Very
walked
quiet.
into it? Oh yeah, of course, because the acoustics are such a big. It's also a benefit of retrofit that people probably don't talk about enough. Having a sort of home that's really affected by external noise can be terrible for your sleep, for your well-being, and lots of these retrofit measures, like insulation, like better fitting windows and doors, can really help to reduce the acoustic burden. But yeah, a fully sealed home might not be for everyone, but it's a great way to go if you've got mechanical ventilation with heat recovery in it.
It's fascinating to see. Are there grants and things available for some of these jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the sort of main questions probably people in your audience will have is, how much is this going to cost?
Yes.
And how am I going to fund it?
I'm glad I was going to ask that, but it's such a big question.
And so in terms of grants, yes, there are absolutely some available. So particularly if you're on a lower income, or you've got a particularly inefficient home, or if you're not on the gas grid. So firstly, you can get in touch with your local authority because they administer some of the grants, particularly the home upgrade grant, which is available for people who aren't on gas, say if you've got an oil boiler. You can also get in touch with your energy supplier, or actually you can get in touch with any energy supplier. It doesn't have to be your own. And they can tell you if you're eligible for things like ECO, which is the Energy Company Obligation, and the Great British Insulation Scheme. There's also another grant which is available for pretty much everyone. It's £7,500, and that helps you replace your fossil fuel gas or oil boiler with a low carbon alternative, like a heat pump. And then the funding's different in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. There might be other things available, so it's worth checking out the websites of those governments too. And then there are sort of finance options as well. Maybe we could sort of come on to that slightly later.
Again, are there people that could help you through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So really depending on where you're living, there might already be some sort of local community organisations that you can get in touch with. They're a great first place to start. So for example, Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol offer free energy advice. People Powered Retrofit in Manchester deliver retrofit plans for people. But you'll be able to find a coordinator by looking on the sort of Trustmark website, and they can sort of help you through. But yeah, definitely get in touch with your energy company. Also worth getting in touch with your bank. Lots of banks have incentives or cashback schemes, low interest loans, or maybe even
green
better
mortgages,
rates for
that's the thing though,
exactly.
Isn't it?
And lots of people don't know about them. I mean, I think when I got in touch with my mortgage provider to renew, they said, oh, by the way, do you know that you could get a cashback if you install some energy efficiency measures? So talk to them as well, and you might be able to make a package work for you.
On the topic of money, if well done, can retrofitting add value to your home? Do you think somebody would pay more for it when it came to
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is think about what you look for when you go to a home. Does it feel comfortable inside? Are you worried about the energy bills? Does it feel like a really good air quality and a nice environment? It's probably the sort of thing that will make you choose that home if it does feel good. There have been a few studies, so National Energy Foundation recently did some research on some homes that they'd retrofit, and they found that it was very likely that installing the retrofit measures did add value to the home. I know that Rightmove also brought out a study in 2023 that said if you went from an EPC F to an EPC C, which is quite a big jump, you could add about 15% onto your home's value.
It's a very big number.
It is a very big number, but it's a very big jump from an F to a C, so probably most people are going to be making smaller interventions.
Either way, it's got to improve your marketability, even if it wasn't to improve your value. The speed of sale, the ability to attract interest has got to be improved.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be the difference between someone choosing your home or someone else's. I think one other thing to say is that if you or your potential buyer are planning to rent the property, then it's going to be a really big factor in whether or not they want to buy it.
Yes.
The government's currently consulting on the minimum energy efficiency requirements for those rental homes.
Yeah.
And there will be requirements that if the energy efficiency isn't good enough, you won't be able to legally rent out that home. So you can imagine that might have quite a severe impact on those
there's lots of that talk in the press, but there's no clear lines yet, are there? They haven't quite said. It's just sort of slightly frightening everybody.
Yes, so at the minute you've got to achieve an EPC of E, which is quite low, and also there are lots of exemptions. The consultation that's out is looking to set much higher standards, but obviously the whole industry is really looking for certainty on when that's going to come in, what the levels are going to be, so that we can get started doing this work.
How can renters benefit from retrofitting?
Yeah, so there's one thing that I would say to start with, which is lots of people think that the grants are just available to owner-occupiers, but actually lots of them are available to renters.
Yeah.
So if you're a renter on a lower income, you could get a grant to effectively upgrade your home, which not only benefits you, but it benefits your landlord.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you're a renter on a lower income, talk to your local authority and your energy provider. See if you're eligible, chat to your landlord. They might be really happy about that as well.
Yeah, good to hear.
Obviously, there are laws in place to protect tenants. So if you're living in a really inefficient home that's below an EPC-E, or your home doesn't have an EPC, it might be that your landlord should be making some improvements. If you feel like you feel comfortable to, talk to your landlord about that. And you also can go through the local authority to see whether or not the landlord should make some improvements to that home.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it's worth saying privately rented homes are some of the worst performing. Renters are at really high risk of fuel poverty a lot of the time. So I'd really encourage landlords as well to think about how they can support their tenants and provide really good quality housing, because if you can lower your tenants' bills, it's going to make them much more likely to be able to keep paying you your rent.
Absolutely.
And de-risk your sort of financial situation.
Probably a difficult question to try and answer, but how disruptive is it? And that's difficult because there are little things like different light bulbs and insulating a boiler and draft proofing, and then there's huge things that could be very disruptive. But can you just talk a bit about that, that topic?
So as you mentioned, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing something big like internal wall insulation, you might need to move out of one or two of the rooms at a time. Lots of these measures, it's possible to keep living in your house for those. So a few months ago, we had the windows replaced on our small 2-bed flat. It took 2 days. My husband was able to work from home the whole time. We didn't have to move out. It was relatively straightforward. But I think a really good way of managing disruption is think about your plan for the home, right? If you're going to be there for a long time, you've probably got ideas like you want to do a loft conversion, you want to do an extension, you want to replace your kitchen or your bathroom. If you get yourself that retrofit plan to start with, you'll know what you can sort of tie in with those works. So at least you can package up some of the disruption and cost together, hopefully also get some efficiencies there and bring down costs.
Okay. Is that where homeowners should start if they're thinking about retrofitting at some point? Start with a plan. Start
with a retrofit plan because there are lots of things that can help you to plan towards. Firstly, not everyone's going to be able to afford to do all of this work straight away. So you want to know, what can I do now that isn't going to have a sort of detrimental effect or something that needs to be redone later? So you don't want to insulate a wall if you're planning to extend out within the next few years, because then you've just wasted your time and money. So they'll be able to sort of help you plan different stages of when you can do the work, but also think about things like maybe at some point in the next 2 to 5 years, your boiler might break. If you know how old your boiler is, you can probably sort of figure it out. You'll be able to start to plan and think, okay, what do I need to do to my home to get myself ready to have a heat pump when that boiler does break, so you don't end up having to buy another boiler and then again install a heat pump. So you kind of
heaven forbid.
plan for doing things once rather than doing them twice.
And research, it does. I'm comforted by the fact you're saying that it's a big topic, but there's also a lot of help out there.
Absolutely. There's great people out there, retrofit coordinators who are real specialists in this. There are lots of architects that focus on it and surveyors. And as I mentioned, there are community groups doing excellent work as well. So they're looking at how you can maybe do many projects in the same area. So people like Retrofit Balsall Heath in Birmingham, Loco Home Retrofit in Glasgow, they're sort of looking at taking a community approach where maybe neighbours try and do some works together. So if you're in an area with one of those groups, do do have a look and see if you can get involved.
It's exciting. Rachel,
Yes.
thank you so much. Really interesting topic. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.